everybody, and welcome to the world's favorite youth baseball podcast, Clearing the Bases, with Coach Jimmy, Phil, and Jerry. I'm David Friedman, and I want to thank you for coming along this journey with us. How are we doing today, Coach?
Doing good, Dave. Another week goes by, some more travel baseball being played, going at it full force.
I'm sure. I'm still, for the most part, enjoying my baseball break. I'm starting to get a little itchy. For it. It's been a little over a month now. So, I feel like it's almost time. I actually did reach out to my head coach to see what he was starting to plan for, if he was starting to plan for the fall yet, we'll see. We'll see what happens there.
Well, like I said to you before, there's always a spot. There's always a spot. You start to get a little itchy. I could always use a good assistant coach. My son is doing his own thing this summer, so I'm pretty much flying solo.
Okay. All right. Well, I may take you up on that one. I just may come out and do a little guest appearance. We'll see. So speaking of guest appearances, we're pretty excited to have our first guest. We decided to mix things up. We've been going for a few episodes here, and the response has been great. We really appreciate everybody sticking with us, and the comments and feedback that we're getting has all been overwhelmingly positive. So we definitely appreciate that. We wanted to mix some things up this week, and we do have a gentleman whose name has been mentioned multiple times on our podcast, and that is the head of the Cadets Development Academy, Angel Lugo. We have him on as our first special guest this week.
Yeah, it would really be good for our listeners to hear what Angel has to say. We talk about development many, many times, but I think that he's going to give a broader view of what development actually means.
Yeah, he gets into a lot of good details on what his facility has to offer, and it's something that anybody who is coaching youth baseball or playing youth baseball, or their kids, if you're serious about trying to get your kids to the next level, we talk a lot about what that really takes. It's not just putting in some time. It's time and it's effort, and it's the right type of effort.
Exactly. And it's also what you and I talk about a lot of times. It's the right mindset. It's creating that right mindset so you're ready to tackle the development part of the game.
Yeah, that's great. So we think it was a great conversation, and without further ado, let's hit it. So we're very happy to have as our guest this week, Angel Lugo. He is the owner and director of the Cadets Player Development Academy in Fishkill, New York. Welcome to our show, Angel.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys.
So, Angel, you've got the premier development academy in the Hudson Valley. I'm very, very proud to say at one point, both of my boys had played there. Jimmy has been one of your main coaches for a number of years. So really want to welcome you to the show. We want to get a lot of good information out of you today.
I look forward to answering your questions today.
All right, great. So let's start talking about a little bit of your background as far as baseball goes. When did you start playing ball?
So I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. I started playing ball at the age of 8 after begging my mom and dad to get me into the local PAL league. And from there, just kind of continued to play PAL, which, is really why one of the reasons I work so hard at trying to get players to understand that having fun is a big part of this game. Because, being in the PAL league, it was a lot of fun, a lot of time spent with friends from the age of 8 till right around 13. And right around that age is when I found the travel world back in those days, which wasn't a big thing as it is today. But I started then at the age of 13 with Bergen Beach, which was a travel organization that played in, all different type of regional events, and kind of grew up from there playing travel ball with them through my high school days. I went to Grady High School, played there starting as a freshman, fortunate enough to be good enough to take over a senior spot. Back in those days, they didn't really care if you were a senior. They just wanted good players on the field. And that obviously kicked off my high school career. And I was fortunate enough again to have a catcher, Lytton Dyer, who was being looked at by many teams. So it gives you that great story of they were there to watch somebody else. And I was fortunate enough to after my senior year, get drafted by the Minnesota Twins. Went on to play 4 years in the minors. Obviously, we learned a lot, was around a lot of great ball players and had a great experience. Till this day, I wish I was still on the baseball field doing it, but reality settles in really quick when I say you're around those 1%ers or those kids that really have some exceptional talent. And, once I was done with that, went out to the real world and started working, and then led me to being back into my passion of baseball and development. So that's where we are today, is in the world of development.
Okay, great. And so, as we said earlier, you're the owner of the Cadets Player Development, and you're also the regional scouting director of USA Baseball. So that's obviously a great honor for you to have. And you want to talk a little bit about what that entails?
Sure. I'll start with the facility, because I think that's really where the passion started. Was, I've always wanted to have a facility. And when I moved up into this market back in '98, I started putting a plan together. And 2007, we opened up with a franchise called Extra Innings. I was with part of the franchise for a good, I guess I would say 13 years now, 14 years. And then decided that it was time to kind of really just follow what I believe a facility should have. And it's really focused on development. Over the last 4 years, I've put together a facility that has all the top, I would say, training items that you can think of.
Training aids.
Training aids, yeah.
Training aids, yep.
We have we've really stepped up our game, and really I've been fortunate enough to be around a lot of good people and learn a lot of what the players need today and what they're doing in the big leagues and how they're developing there at that level. So we really went out and spent some time finding the right things. We have a sensory system by SnapTech that kind of covers you to a point where most people don't even know you should be training. So that's a visual training aid and sensory training aid. We have the virtual reality hitting. We have simulators. We have hit tracks, which kind of shows you where the ball goes. So we've brought together a lot of these things because the players today are very visual, but more importantly, there's a lot of things that they're not doing on their own that will help them get better. So with that being said, that's really been our focus, is to go out and find the best development, I would say, items out there that will help develop players to a level that, is not just for your basic player, but all the way through that high level player. And that's been my passion from day one. The reason I got into the facility business, because I love helping a player develop and understand what it's going to take. Because development is one thing, and then the mentoring and helping a player understand the highest level is a totally different, animal. So we went ahead and went that route. In 2012, I went and got certified by Top Velocity, which is one of the best, I would say, the best pitching program in the States. And so I went and learned a little bit more about that. So that also led us to a lot of the technology we use today. And I think right now, as a training facility, we can service a MLB player to the 5-year-old that's getting started, and really help them understand what we need to do to help you achieve your goals, basically. And we'll go over those things as we go. But then back in 2016, I was fortunate enough to join the NTIS, USA Baseball's NTIS division. Started as a scout, just kind of getting things going. And within that year, Jeff Schaefer, who's my boss, gave me both states to run, because we were, again, doing a lot of great things with camps and working on development and going out there and finding some top level players to get down to Cary, North Carolina. So the USA Baseball part then became a big part of what we do here in the Hudson Valley, is trying to get players not only from our area, but from both states down to USA Baseball to make national teams.
Excellent. A lot of what you talk about there in terms of the development of the players is so important, and giving them the tools, because so many times what we've seen through the years is a lot of people, whether it be parents, the coaches, the kids themselves, whatever, they're investing the time, but they don't have the skills and the tools to really get to that next level. And if you're doing something wrong repeatedly, obviously, then it becomes so much harder to untrain bad habits than to start fresh. So getting jump in and getting involved early is going to be key, I'm sure, for a lot of that.
I talk about development all the time on the previous shows. It's all I talk about is development. But Angel, I think that you're in a better position to give a better understanding of, what does development actually mean?
So, I think, Jimmy, is a great, topic, because a lot of families right now don't recognize what development is. They think by just going out to play games and field over the country and do all these big tournaments, that's development. That's definitely not, it's a piece of development, but it's not what development is. And I think that we have to start trying to guide some families with better education on what does that look like. You know, we're going through a stage right now, or an era, where a lot of dads did not play baseball. They were lacrosse players, they were soccer players. I hear it all the time from dads. They feel comfortable maybe having a catch with the kid at 8, but by the time they hit 12, they're like, I don't know what to do now. So we're really, trying to get everyone to understand that the development of an athlete first, and I think that's the piece some are missing, is they think they got to go right to baseball. You got to develop the athlete first, and that's the first stage. Stage 1 for me, and when you look at USA Baseball, they've done a great job with the development plans, and when you look at it, the first stage is that 5 to 6, 5 to 7 activation stage, they call it. It's just getting a player to understand that first you just got to have movements, right? We're in an era of kids being indoors playing video games, so they have great thumbs, but they're not outside getting coordinated and running around. And, those are the things we did as kids when, we were in the streets of Brooklyn. You're running between cars. When you're playing football, you're trying to dodge a car. It was just athleticism that was happening because you were just in the streets doing it, where the kids today are different. They're indoors a lot more. You got to drag them outside. So stage 1 to me in development is just starting to create the athlete. And when you look at what USA Baseball puts out, that's pretty much what we're saying is get them to get out there, make some movements, play different sports. Don't get tied into just one sport. And most important in that stage of development is make sure it's fun, right? Trying to make sure they're enjoying what they're doing. I call the stage of 5 to 12. We're trying to make them fall in love with the sport they pick, whether it's football, baseball, basketball. They have to fall in love young to want to put in the work later. So in that first stage, we have to make sure they fall in love. So the two sides that I look at is the training and development, which is, going to a facility like mine or someone in your local area where they are now working on those type of, training skills. And then there's the development of on field, right? That's 2 different things. You have coaches that are great baseball coaches on field and guys that are great in a closed facility doing the training. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're always good at both, by the way. So I really try to push that, there is 2 different stages of development within those first few years. Right. So the guys that are the coaches on field are the ones going to focus on that communication on field. They're going to talk about being a team and how to be an individual within that team. They're going to lay some foundations of discipline and those other things that come with the game. So, I always look at development in those stages. Like my job when I first started was really focusing on the training and development side, just getting the players to understand movements and become athletes in my facility, and then when I got involved with the field aspect, it did change. And I started looking at things a little different because it is different on field.
You and I have talked about it times before. I'm a field coach. I am not a trainer developer like you are. I'm more like a utility guy. All right. I know a little bit about this, a little bit about that. But then when it gets above my pay grade, I got to send the players to somebody like you that could take it further.
With that being said, too, parents have to understand that coaching a baseball game is not developing a player. It's 2 different things. Like developing on field is communication, teamwork, hit and run situations. All those other things that are in the game are different than taking someone and say, hey, mechanically, this is what's wrong. Here's the movement pattern that's wrong, the sequence that's wrong. I don't expect, and again, obviously, because I'm a baseball guy, when my son played high school ball, I didn't expect his coach to be able to fix his pitching mechanics because I understood that it's 2 different things. And parents have to understand that when they play travel ball or little league ball, like the coach is different. He's the guy strategizing a game. Maybe he's not the guy that's going to see a kid dropping his hands or anything like that. Yeah, he might notice some little things, but he might not be able to be the one that fixes it. So in that age before 12, I think a lot of parents have this perception that the coach should be able to fix all this and I don't have to do anything else. Well, those are typically the kids that end up not getting moving ahead in the game because they're not learning and changing anything. They're kind of just seeing it in game. And it's 2 different things. And I think when we talk development, there's so much we can cover. But I think if we stick to the basics with 412, that we start getting an understanding that there's a part of this that's a training and development side that is done off the field in a sense. and then there's the training and development on field, right? And I think once you can separate the two and understand, like, it's even now when I'm coaching my team on field, I'm not mechanical with them on field. I'm never telling a pitcher, hey, you're blowing open, you're doing this. I'm trying to just coach them as a coach on field and making my notes so when we're inside practicing that I can then work with them separately. But it's hard for everyone to have that ability to do both, but understanding that parents have to understand it's two different things.
Absolutely. And I think one of the important things is also just a lot of it just comes down to time as well. Whether it be, like I said, whether it be coaching town ball or coaching travel, or this year I was able to jump in and coach JV baseball locally. This year was a little different, certainly because of COVID and how compressed our season was. But when you're playing 3-4 games a week, and you want to practice the other 2 days, but everybody either just pitched or is going to pitch tomorrow, so you can't really do a lot of work on pitching mechanics at that point. It was really, really difficult, like you said, to try to make changes almost midstream.
As a high school coach, it's impossible. With my high school team, I would never think to start trying to change a pitcher's mechanics because I don't have the time to do it. I may say, listen, in the off season, go see Coach Lugo. He's going to be able to help you so that you come back next year. Going back to Angel's point about a field coach, so to speak, is different than a trainer. But one of the things that I wanted to go through is Angel was just talking about, the younger players. So Dave, you and I have talked about 5-year-old baseball, 6-year-old travel teams. At those levels, okay, my feeling is that with a 5, 6, 7-year-old player, yes, you want to teach them how to play baseball. You want to teach them how to field. You want to teach them how to catch the ball, throw the ball, the simple basic stuff of baseball. But to your point, Angel, you also want to teach them movement patterns, like skipping and jumping and running, and the simple movement patterns that, like you said, parents don't understand. They want to jump right in 5, 6 years old, and they're looking to play games with these kids. Right. And I don't believe that that's how you develop players.
No, again, I think that's where we have to learn to separate, even as young as 5 and 6. Like when you're running down to a T-ball little league game, like, again, you're not going to have time to work on a kid's arm path. Like, it's not going to happen, right? So there is that piece of it, like, hey, get them into programs outside of that can help them do that. In the meantime, there is things that coaches can do during those things, and whether they're teaming up with facilities like mine and getting guys out on the field that can help them work on some of those patterns. But like I said earlier, think about most little leagues right now, the dads, they're great dudes. They want to volunteer, but a lot of them right now, I'd say 90, I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say 90% of them probably didn't play baseball. They were lacrosse guys. They were softball guys. Soccer guys, because we went through an era where, and we all know the numbers dropped in baseball when lacrosse came and soccer came. So, there's a lot of those fundamentals that are missed because you don't have coaches that know them. But more important to your question, Jim, is parents have to understand, like 5, 6, it's about maybe getting them some lessons at times or get them into a program in a facility to work on mechanics, but then get them on the field just to have fun and learn as they go. They will correct arm patterns as time goes, right? Take a kid and have them throw a football at a baseball practice. Do something like that. It changes it up a little, but it's fun. It's different, but yet they're working on arm path. So there's things like that can be done. I think there is development on field, that can be done for that 5, 6-year-old group, where we focus on movement during practice and not just the basic, throw baseball to first and things like that. But I think that we have to distinguish the two differences with families and coaches and have them understand, like, your job at 5 or 6 is make sure you start getting the kid to fall in love. Have fun, teach them the basics, get them going. And then, when you look at that bucket of 5 to 12, really, like as a kid gets to 10, 11, 12, they start really loving the game or liking it. Then you're going to want to get them into some, travel ball and stuff. That's when you start looking at the different kids and say, hey, this kid needs to focus more on just practices, playing rec ball, and the numbers tell you with USA that a kid at that age, 60% of it should be typically, practice time. 65%, I think they use as a number. And then that changes as they get older. Practice time becomes so important. And I think a lot of, unfortunately, because of time, like Dave just said, like a volunteer coach is not going to have 3 days a week to practice and play one game. Like, it's not going to happen, right? So families have to understand that. Little League directors have to understand it, and they have to come up with some creative solutions to help players continue to get better and not worry about playing 5 games in a week, or 3 games in a week. It flat out tells you in the development plan by USA that it should really be like 3 days of practice, 1 game, 2 days of practice, 1 day of a game. And that's kind of a guideline, just to keep the kids engaged. Think about it. A 5-year-old is going to practice 3 or 4 days a week and then playing. He's going to be burnt out. Like, that's too much baseball for a 5-year-old. It's different playing in your backyard with your wiffle ball bat. You can go do that the extra day. You know what I mean? Like, and that's how we did it when we were younger. I mean, we spent our days on the wiffle ball, playing wiffle ball, playing stick ball. Like, it was all baseball related in a sense, but it was not being in a game, So I totally agree with you, Jimmy. These T-ball national tournaments that you hear, or 6U national, like, to me, that just I don't understand why that's happening in the game and why we're allowing it. So definitely, I think, like you're saying, for the younger kids, there's definitely those stages that we got to work through. And I look at a lot of that, like 5, 6 as a group. And then once you get to that 7 to 12 bucket, you got like 7 to 10-year-olds as a group, of a stage of whether you should be focusing on discovery, organized play, fundamentals, motivation. Like, that's where you start building that motivation for players. And that's where the coaches come in on field, is how do you take a kid that's failing and turn that into spinning it the way he needs to so he can be confident. If we don't build confidence in a baseball player before the age of 12, when they get to 13 and it starts to get harder, it's really hard to overcome that. So to me, that bucket, from 12U to 7, it really starts to focus on build fundamentals, build confidence, start being the motivator. And that's where the love starts to happen. Once they start feeling confident, boy, now I'm in love with the game because I feel good. If I make a mistake, I can shake it off and move on. So I'm really big at that age that we just really focus on that during a workout. Even my instructors, I try to let them know, like, when you're doing lessons with young kids, it's about motivating. It's about building confidence, not so much the technical part that they hit the ball off the tee right. Like, that's really just a result of maybe them not having confidence and not thinking right. So focus your energy on the things that we can make an impact on as the kid goes. So the more we can do that, I think, on our end, when we're doing the developing and training, and now the coaches are doing some of that, I think we start building the player.
So let's build off that. So once we're getting, and I think this is something we're all pretty well in agreement on in terms of the youngest of kids, less focus on games, more focus on development, and not just baseball, but just general athleticism. I think we could sum it up with that. Again, I've seen 13, 14-year-old kids that can't sidestep because they don't have that agility to do. It's amazing to me. But let's get into as the player starts to get a little older. So now we're getting into, I think you have your next bucket is kind of the 12 to 14 range. So this is kind of transitioning to the major league size field, first of all. So that opens up the door to a lot. And I think that's also where, I know that's also where we see the biggest drop off in terms of player involvement. Once they get off of the small field and onto the big field, those numbers do drop quite a bit, right?
Absolutely. So, when you start looking at that bucket 12 to 14, I like to even trim it down a little bit more than that, right? We have those 12-year-olds turning 13. That 13U age group, to me, is probably the most crucial age group to work on confidence, right? So they love baseball at 12. They felt great out in the small field. Now they get to the 13U field and it's 60, 90. They never hit their growth spurt. They're a kid that maybe is average size, and now the throw is 100 feet from shortstop, and they're like, oh my God, I can't throw there. I stink. I shouldn't be playing this game. So that's really, to me, I almost separate that age group out and say that year has to become so important for us to understand as instructors on the development side and the coaches on the field, that is a crucial year to understand pitch counts, to understand, the psychology of this game. That's really the bucket year to me. And I think that once we get them through that 13U and they get up to that 14U, that's typically when we start seeing a split of kids that love the game and want to play, kids that love the game and want to go to a higher level, right? There's nothing wrong with being the kid that loves the game and wants to play and wants to maybe be on a club team in college or a D3 school. And there's some D3 schools that play just as good as D1s. But the kid that says, I really love this and this is my passion and I want to now take my game to a little higher level, that's where the split kind of starts to happen. But 13U, going back to that, I can't stress enough, like that to me is a year of building confidence, motivation, keeping the kids engaged, practices get tougher, like building all that stuff. The discipline becomes so important, making them understand once we cross the white lines, how we conduct ourselves, our understanding the baseball, rules and understanding how to play the game. And, I use this word a lot, getting the feel of the game and understanding like that feel is so important. People always ask me, well, how do you teach feel? A lot of that comes with experience from guys like myself that now start teaching a kid or asking a kid, hey, what did you feel during that at bat? Instead of saying, hey, this is what you did wrong. Hey, what did you feel? And, what have we, then ask the questions to lead him to understand what he did wrong is so much more impactful than saying, hey, you dropped your shoulder, you dropped this, you dropped that.
Right.
You don't understand, like it takes a lot of that confidence building because once a kid can search for the answer, that builds confidence because he figured it out. Someone's not telling him he failed. He's recognizing, hey, I didn't do this right, and that's why I failed. So I think it's so important.
For those of you that don't know, that's the age group that I coach for. Coach Lugo is the 13 and 14-year-olds. But right after the game, when I'm talking to the players, the very first question I always ask them is, how did we do today? And to your point, every time they'll come back, they know what they did wrong. They know. It doesn't take me saying, hey, listen, you did this wrong, you did that. They already know. And then so I'm able to build on that by saying, all right, guys, so we know we did wrong. Next practice, we're going to address it and we'll take care of it.
But Jimmy, think about back when we started, that was one of the challenges that all our coaches had, right? We went to huddles and everybody was just telling the kids what they did wrong. Right. And that was one of the things we recognized. And we said, hey, this is where we're going wrong is we're just telling kids what they do wrong instead of asking that question like, hey, how did we play today? What were our opportunities? What did the defense look like for us today? Let them tell you. And now, believe it or not, that's a simple way to create your practice plan for your next practice. They told you we didn't hit the cutoffs. We didn't do this. That's our practice focus. Now they see a result from what they had opportunities on. Now we're trying to fix it. But what does that do? It builds confidence. So it goes back to making sure like everything we do as a coach, even on the training and development side, is if we finish a lesson, hey, what were our opportunities today? Was this and this? Okay, next time you come, we're going to put a bigger focus on that, And it's the same thing when you're on field. The more we can get the players to understand and have a feel of the game, the more they will excel in the game as time goes.
In addition to the feel for the game, I know you're real big on the mental aspect of the game, preparing mentally as well as physically. I had a situation this year with one of my players who was slumping a little bit in the middle of the season at the plate. And I had noticed that he went from jumping on the first pitch to taking a strike, and he was putting himself in the hole over and over again. And the one after 2 games or something, I asked him, I said, tell me about your approach at the plate. And he just stared at me like I had 10 heads. Because we as a team did not really give a take sign. So I don't know if it was his dad or if it was, somebody else must have gotten in his ear on that. But that's where I think it is important to a degree to get their input. I'm still a little old school in terms of the discipline side, something else that you talked about, where we can't have, there's got to be a line. And I think every year it gets tougher and tougher to find that line between, getting their input when you want it and then kind of sitting there shutting up and listening to you when that's what the time is.
Right.
I think that's gotten more and more difficult through the years.
I think, that's a great point, and I think that comes really, again, on the field side, a little different, but it's understanding to teach them how to draw those lines. And it's hard because you might do it one way, then the other coach is doing it differently. And that's where we have to get on the same page as a unit when we're coaching kids on field, because they have to understand the difference between when I'm asking you a question and I'm ready to now talk and you're still talking. Like, Like they know Coach Lugo start talking, you better shut it or there's going to be some consequences. But and there's things that I do though too, that as a coach, I create a lot of my, my practices around and my games around certain things. And, we call it cadet root court, which when I was in the minor, it was kangaroo court. So we just have like 5 bullet points per hitting, pitching, and we have like little things we do and say, hey, I'll give you a small example. You call me Angel instead of Coach Lugo, it's 5 sprints for the team. If, you strike out on 3 pitches looking without swinging the bat, that's 3 sprints for the team. Like there's certain things that we set as goals for ourselves as a team that we put on there, and that's how we do it. And now when they do things right, they get to reduce the sprint. So, it makes them to focus on those little things that we want. So I think, going back to development, it's about those things that we can start creating as a unit, whether it's working with high school coaches and being on the same page instead of looking at travel ball as a bad thing. Look at it as it could be a joint venture together, and we can be helping you develop the players, which is something I'm working towards every year, trying to find ways that I can open those doors with the high school coaches so that when they play for me in the summer, I give the coach a report at the end of the summer. I have no issue doing that. It's so we can work together. If you tell me, hey, on JV, I have a kid that plays for you, but he's playing shortstop for us next year, but we have him in left and we need to give him more reps at short, then I need to know that. So there's things like that we can fix to help players. And that does go with development, by the way. So the more we can all work as a unit, it really helps a lot.
Well, to your point, that just happened tonight, right? Where one of the players on my team this past spring played the outfield for his school team, and I didn't even know it. So it was brought out by the parent that, hey, he'd been playing. And, now I'm, next practice, believe me, he's going to take reps in the outfield. Let's help. Let's help his high school team, get him where they have him playing. We'll still give him the reps where he's playing for us. But again, to your point, yeah, we can help.
Yeah, and I think there's a thing and this is probably since day one with as far as once travel really became proficient. We're not talking about, when Angel, you talked to yourself about playing back in the day. There was probably one travel team back then. I know in this area we had Moose team, which was the best of the 12-year-olds, and all the the shortstop from every all-star team got together and played in like one tournament or something. So I'm talking about more of maybe 10 years ago when travel really started to get popular. There was always an assumed adversarial relationship with training facilities, and it's something I just never understood. Why would we go into talking to them or meeting with them? This is when I was on the board of directors of the local league, and they're like, oh, this facility, and whether it was yours or one of the other facilities that aren't no longer around, they're offering to do like a coach the coaches clinic, and we'd get 2 people to go or something like that. Or even on the board of directors, they would be like, oh, we don't want them coming in here and stealing our players. I'm like, do you understand what's good for them is good for us, and what's good for us is good for them? I just never understood, but you must have seen a ton of examples of that.
I could understand that, because unfortunately there is travel organizations that don't believe in local baseball. And I do. I'm a big community baseball guy. All my kids know prior to the age of 12, like, you need to play Little League. We come secondary to that until our time of season comes, which for me, the spring is all Little League. We shut down for that all-star period so they can do that. And then we pick up again, because that's the only time, and I explained this to a few parents years ago, it's the only time your kid may be the best player on the field. Might be the only time. And there's so much that can be learned. I had a parent ask me once, well, why would I have him, play with his local Little League? He's so much better than everybody. I said, oh, really? Your son is too good to teach others how to get better? It's not a good opportunity for him to be a leader? So one of the biggest lessons I learned, it was at the age of 12, Coach Dexter from PAL, he said to me, you're only as good as the players around you. And that always stuck in my head. My philosophy in the game changed at 12 when he said that to me. I became more vocal. I was a pretty quiet kid up to that age. All of a sudden, like with the third baseman, like nothing gets between us. And what turned into, like, it changed my mindset because he triggered that in me. I didn't have that at the time. And once he said that to me, I was like, wow, well, if I want to be really good, I better start talking. So I can't stress enough to parents that have players that are on our travel teams that are, good players, but they're probably the best in their town. Well, go learn what it's like to be the best guy on the field, because that may never happen again. Like think about it. Even, you're talking about the 1%ers, even on a field of right now, if you look at the Yankees, there's one or two main guys. Everyone else is good, but they're not those main guys. So learn what that feels like, because it might never happen again. So I was really big on that. I think it's still something I try to push. It's a little harder at the age of 13 to say, hey, go play town ball, because again, if they're that player that wants to play at a higher level, they're going to need to start getting out a little bit. But I also think there's a big opportunity for Little League and for them to have a summer league that the kids continue to play, so they don't feel they have to go play travel. More than half the teams out there now that say that are travel, all they're doing is taking kids that really would be playing Little League and putting them in a local league up here that has an A, B, C, D league, and that's what they're doing. So Little Leagues have an opportunity to find a way to make that happen. When I played PAL, we played from April to August. They had the All-Stars all selected. We go play All-Stars. And when we finished early, we came back and joined our friends again and kept playing. And that would eliminate families feeling they have to go play travel ball. I mean, there's a lot of families that I think are doing it because there's just not another alternative.
But isn't another problem with Little League that parents feel that when their child is playing in Little League, that they're not getting the proper instruction, that they're not learning, they're not developing, which is something that, and Angel, you even notice about me, that I believe that, Little League coaches should be trained, even if it's the very basic stuff, just to be able to bring these kids to keep them moving up that next level ladder.
I think their challenges is back to their volunteers. Where do they have the time to do it? And look, I get all that. I think, again, local Little Leagues should challenge themselves to figure that out. And that's why they don't have summer ball. Like, how many guys are going to volunteer to coach in the summer?
Right.
Now you got to give up your summer. But we're doing something this year to try. We're doing a development league from Monday to Thursday, so families have their weekends off. We're running it this year in conjunction with Fishkill Little League to try to see how that works, see if we can grow, that into a not just a development league, but a league that can exist in the summer. And that's kind of the vision behind the Hudson Valley RBI League a while when I first started trying to get that up and going, which has turned into more recreation. What I mean by that, we do a lot more camps. But at the end of the day, we want to find ways to keep kids on the field. And the only way they'll improve is if we practice with them and then we play a game. It doesn't have to be 5 practices a week. It could be 1 practice and then play a game on Wednesday, and then you're off to the shore on the weekend. That's great. At least we keep the kids on the field a little longer and put ourselves in position that maybe that kid, as he starts to grow and mature, now wants to play a travel ball and doesn't walk away from the game.
And you're not burning anyone out.
Right.
Right. That's what I was going to say. For those kids that are maybe not at the elite level, you're still, what we talked about before, building that love of the game where you don't have to be. And it's one of the issues that I've had with other parents where they have pulled their kid out of Little League ball and just played travel. I'm like, okay, your kid's playing 3 innings a game in right field. If he stayed in Little League, he might be a starting shortstop. He might be the second best pitcher on his team. Things like that. So I think that's fantastic. It sounds like a great idea. This is your first year.
This is our first year. I think the parents are missing the fact that this game is one of the hardest games of any sport, right? I mean, that's not me making it up. That's what everybody says. If you don't build confidence, so when you take little Johnny and you put him on a travel team and now he's batting $150 for the summer, well, you're just crushing the kid. Yeah, he might have got out there and played, but he's hitting $150. Like, the confidence level just keeps sinking compared to, hey, I'm playing rec ball and I might be hitting 350 and I'm having fun and I'm enjoying it. Now little Johnny hits the growth spurt or gets a little stronger, and now he starts getting ready for that more competitive stage. And I think we missed that. A lot of families are caught up on the wrong concept, and I think that's where USA Baseball is doing a great job. They're educating. They have a great segment for parents to kind of take a little class, which is phenomenal. I took the class myself. So there is that stage, that's missing. That I think that they need to understand. Like, you're hurting the player instead of helping him.
But now,
definitely,
like something that you just said too, just triggered something. A kid goes and he's playing for his town Little League team. And like you said, he's batting 350 in the Little League team. Now people are going to say, well, wait a minute. That kid shouldn't be here. He should be playing travel ball. So now he leaves the Little League and he goes to travel ball. And we have that same cycle happening again. Again, it's something that I've talked about before about who is actually assessing the player, which is, again, a difficult thing to do. He may be a 350 hitter amongst, Little League players, but the minute you put him on a travel team, like you said, he's batting $150. So it's kind of a vicious cycle. And I could see how it's a very complex problem that I don't see how you solve.
Until Little League and Cal Ripken figure out how to keep that and make that bigger and not get so caught up on the fact that I want to go play in Westchester for a Saturday instead of finding a way to play in your local community. I think those things will be a little more difficult. But in that player development side of what I was trying to get to is there's that confidence building that needs to happen for players. And once we can build that, it gets easier for us once they hit the age of 14, whereas where I feel, where I then start looking at the players in those two different buckets, and you kind of get the sense with USA, we start looking at that point also, because that's typically where they change, right? There's the player that loves the game, enjoys playing the game, likes the game a lot. They're that 14U player coming up. Then there's a 14U player that says, I want to be an MLB player. That's just his goal, let's say. That kid's going to be a little more serious. And the difference that changes at that age when it comes to development is the amount of time that a kid is willing to sacrifice to go train and develop. So you have two 14-year-old players, little Johnny here. You got, Tom on this side. Tom says, I'm willing to give up all my video games. I want to do everything I can to get better. This kid little Johnny says, I still want to play video games, but I love playing baseball. That's okay. Let little Johnny continue to play baseball. This kid who wants more out of it will take a different path and put more time into his development. And I think parents need to have those conversations, with their players, is how much are you willing to sacrifice to play this game at the highest level, or at a level that you want to play at. I mean, we all dream of being MLB players, right? So I always use that but we all know just playing as high as I can, and I've had several conversations with families at times and players individually, where, the mom and dad come in and talk to me about, hey, my little Johnny loves the game and, he wants to do this. And I know he's a kid that I can tell he's a kid that doesn't put time in. And I ask the question, well, how much time does he spend on baseball? Or how much time does he spend on his video games? And sure enough, well, he plays video games all night and he doesn't really practice much. Well, that's the difference. The kid that starts to give up that video game and starts to raise this side is a kid that's a little more serious. And I think families have to have that conversation and recognize that there's nothing wrong with a kid that wants a different balance. That's okay, as long as they still love the game and want to go play. Maybe they don't have to be on a travel team that's going, away every weekend. They just play on a more local travel team. And I think there's a place for them to keep going, because that kid could change by the age of 15 to be, hey, I really love this game. I got to do. And now he tries to fall into the other bucket, but and the good thing is when you're 14, 15, there's still time. Everyone hits different growth spurts, all that stuff.
That's actually what I was just going to talk about when we talk about those age ranges. We kind of think of it of 12, 13 with the growth spurts, but there's plenty of kids that don't hit it until 14, 15. And at that point, now that 90-foot base doesn't seem, it's not a mile away anymore. They can make it there. Hopefully, if we did our jobs right in the beginning part of their quote unquote career, then maybe they are still interested. And now, like you said, they can turn the corner on that and keep playing. But getting them in the position, the term you used, I like it because the first thing that came to mind is just picking their path, helping them pick their path for that period. I think that's what's really important, because when we start doing the round, square peg in the round hole, and a kid says, yeah, I want to play travel, but it's only because his friends are playing travel, but he's not willing to do the extra work that does, then yeah, you can play travel, but what are we really accomplishing at that point?
So Angel, you actually have a good example that you could tell everybody about. Let's talk a little bit about Lenny Torres, because here is a kid that did all of the right things, had that drive, and nobody knows better than you what he actually had to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great story. I mean, I saw Lenny at the age of 13, turning 14. He came into the facility for a lesson. recommended from a fellow student of mine. He came into the facility for his first pitching lesson. I just saw something special in his arm. I was like, well, this is a kid I know can do something bigger. But I think the real story in that was once we recognized that he had some talent and really loved the game, because I had a conversation with this kid and he was like, yeah, I love baseball. It was how the family trusted a process or a vision of how we're going to get him to hit his goals. And it was really Lenny Jr., obviously, who guided us with that, right? Because it was always asking him, how far do you want to go? What do you want? It wasn't about what Coach Lugo saw or what his dad and mom thought he can do. It was really when we had those conversations and we built a great relationship over the years, it was about what does Junior want? And Junior every year, wanted to get better and kept saying, I want to do this. And all right, this is how we got to train. So we were able to kind of take all these beliefs I've had for years. And he was my guy that I was going to say, this is the kid that I can show if we stick to a process, a program, and I get the kid to want to commit to it. Because it was never, I want you to come in for something. No, it was, Lenny, if you need me, I'm here for you. If you want to come in and work out extra, if you want to do this extra, I'm here. And I have to say, like, the kid initiated all that. And my job was to mentor him, get him to think at a higher level. I have a simple philosophy when I start working with certain kids that I see that in, is I train them 2 levels up and I make them act 2 levels up. So what I mean by that, if you're a 9th grader, you should be working out like an 11th grader and thinking like an 11th grader and acting like an 11th grader. If you're a sophomore, you should be a senior already. If you can get a child, a player, to start thinking like that, they raise their level. And obviously, what does a coach see when he comes to the field? He sees a kid that's a sophomore playing like a senior, knows the game, knows where to be, has all the mechanics of it. Like, when you get them to see that early, then obviously that opens those doors for all those bigger schools. And the mental side of it is so crucial. Like with Lenny, we had great conversations when he did things that he shouldn't do. I could give you examples of, he would give at the time I didn't coach the team. He would give my coaches a hard time. And I always told him, if he gives you a hard time, he has to answer to me. There was a great example. One of my coaches, it was a rookie coach. Lenny gave him a hard time. He said, sit there till Coach Lugo gets here. I didn't get there till the end of practice. So you have to sit there for 2.5 hours waiting for me to come so that I can have a conversation with him on how he should be behaving when it's another coach that's here and the whole 9. And then I said, you just wasted 3 hours of your day that could have been spent on training because you did not take the right approach on how to handle something. So, but we had that bond that when we talked, he respected it, and then he adjusted and just kept changing those things. So really with his training, it was, we laid out a plan every year. It was, hey, how much weight are we putting on this year? How many days a week are we working out? How much time are you spending on your studies? Like making sure everything was in line for him. I give the Torres family a ton of credit for trusting someone, because I know it's hard for any parent to say, I'm going to trust this guy to help me with my son. Because they got phone calls all the time from all the elite travel teams, and everybody was calling for Lenny over the years. And they always said, nope, we're with Coach Lugo. Whatever he tells us we can do, we'll do. So they believed in the process. They believed that they didn't need to go to Georgia. I didn't send Lenny to any of those big events until we said, okay, now we want to go. And, again, obviously he would get invited to everything, and we just chose the ones we wanted to go to. But it was about guiding a player. It was about mentoring him, teaching him to think 2 levels up so that he was conducting himself different, from how he walked off the bus from a high school game, how he conducted himself on the field. Like all those things were discussions and prepping him for his goal. His goal was, one of some of the goals we had, or that he had, I should say, were, I want to make a USA national team. So we worked really hard to get him there. He fell a little short. He was like on the 40-man roster and then just missed it. And that fired him up even more. But at a very young age, I was fortunate enough that, we had a conversation. I think it was his sophomore year. And Lenny, I asked him, what's your goal in this game? And he just flat out said, I want to be an MLB pitcher. He goes, I want to play in the MLB, and I said, well, I'm here to help you. Are you willing to put the work in? And we kind of just hit it off from there. And he knew that I was just trying to guide him to his goals. If he missed something, it was like, hey, that was your time that you wasted, not mine, but I would tell you, he didn't miss much, man. We started, he was always on it. I'll tell you, I give him a lot of credit. He really stood locked in those years. He even on Thanksgiving one year, I think it might have been he was 15U when we started this. He's like, Coach, well, Thursday is our workout day. Like, are we still working out? I'm like, hey, we can work out, but we got to do it at 6 a.m. He's like, all right, we'll be there. So we started our turkey grind day. Every Thanksgiving, we're at the facility at 6 a.m, thanks to Lenny Torres, working out, getting his workout in before we go, back and eat. And we kept that tradition now. We have it going on every year since. But that's the kind of kid he was. So obviously with my expertise and my experience and my connections, I was able to give him the guidance, but it was all on the player. And, I say that to every player that comes through, that talks to me about their goals. I always tell them it's going to be on you. Like, I can guide you. I can help you. I can tell you what scouts are looking for. I can tell you what college coaches are looking for, but it's all going to be on how you commit yourself to that goal. And it's the biggest sacrifice. And that's one thing that most people don't recognize. Even to be a D1 player, like, there's a lot of sacrifice that you have to put in to be that level. That's why only 7% of baseball players end up playing D1. Think about it, 7% players get to play D1.
Yeah.
Yep, it's something. So on that note, a couple things I wanted to touch on with that. One, just let's give a little bit more of a background for anybody that's not familiar with Lenny Torres. As a 17-year-old, he was drafted out of high school in the first round by the Cleveland Indians, and he's been in their farm system since then. He's still progressing along to some different levels. So he's kind of there's been a couple of big players from our area, but he's obviously the most recent one that's had some success. So that's very it's just such a testament to himself, but also you as the main trainer and the facility.
So there are a lot of people out there, Angel, that have young players that they have these same aspirations of going and playing professionally. Just so they get an idea of what it's like, give them a little snapshot of like what a day in Lenny's life was when he was training to, before the draft.
So this is a high school player that by the age of 15, when he made that commitment that he wants to be that level, was in the gym in the morning at 6 a.m., right up to when he had to get to school. He would then be at the facility later on to do some stuff at the facility. So that was a typical Monday. So you figure he was probably spending about 3 to 4 hours just on his development. Then Tuesdays, we had our session, which was about 2 hours long with me. He did that twice a week. So you figure he was taking about 20 to 24 hours a week just for the game of baseball, just to be able to develop. On top of that, maintain great grades, keep his academics going, find a way to socialize a little, which he was very good at, just doing just enough. He was committed to getting to bed on time. Like by the time he was a junior, he was in bed by 10 o'clock. And, his parents were always the ones that tell me, and I was like, that's great. He changed his eating habits. Like he put all this, and that's all stuff that you have to take time to change and put into your day. It's not just the baseball side, it's not just the time you spend training. It really becomes a time overall that you're spending to make the change. Most kids at 15 are not going to go to bed by 10 because they got to get up at 6. They're playing video games to midnight. So those are sacrifices that come with the discipline and goal setting for yourself. So I would say, if a kid really wants it, at the age of 15 is a good year to start. 14 is still that building year, but by 15 is when they have to start really putting the hours in. He would probably, like I said, 24 hours a week, add in your school time to that. You can see how many hours it's like a job, but he loved it. We kept it fun. We kept it loose. And we kept hitting goals. And that was really the bottom line with Lenny, is that we would hit goals. Like we would set a goal and go there. We'd come out of a season, off season, say, hey, this year we want to be 92, 93. And hey, we were 95, like those are the kind of things that we were able to do. We left the senior year wanting to hit 100 and we hit 99 once and a few 98s he hit. We were pumped up about that. But, again, he did a lot of great things because he was committed to it. So the players that are looking to do the same, it's about the commitment level and the sacrifices you're willing to put in. That goes not just for a guy that wants to get drafted out of high school. That goes for a kid that wants to play D1. It comes with training hours. You got to be willing to put in the training hours.
So basically, when you have a player, and this is what I take from what I saw happen with Lenny, is don't get me wrong. You have to have the ability. You have to have the talent. It has to be there. That's no question about that. But the difference is the mental side of the game, or the mental approach that a player takes. Okay. Because again, you could be the best player in the world. If you don't have that drive like a Lenny Torres has, yeah, I mean, you're going to be a good baseball player, but it's probably going to fall off somewhere if you don't have the right mindset.
Absolutely. I think, as you're mentoring a kid that has those aspirations, it's not only like I said, all the training on the baseball side is starting to develop the mindset of an elite athlete, the understanding of what failing is at a higher level compared to, okay, I failed at a travel game compared to I'm now on PG giving up a home run on my first outing. And he took that like it was nothing. He just got the ball back and kept doing his work. And those are all the maturities that they saw, and why he became a first-round pick, by the way, because he really came out. We kind of, with Lenny, like we kept developing. It wasn't until his junior year that we kind of said, okay, now let's open the doors, and we had scouts come down to watch him, and and that was all from a camp I had at the facility. There was 2 Yankee scouts there, a Yankee scout and a White Sox scout. We were doing something for Baseball Miracles. I tell the Yankee scout I have a kid with an incredible arm. She comes back that spring to watch him, and then she, it starts to spread. So from that end of it, that's where I kind of helped the most. Was I kind of tabled it all for the right time to show him, and man, did he shine when he did. Like, he was all for it, and I think the mental part of it was a big part of that training. Like, people don't realize how much time goes into that when you're working with players. It's getting them to understand the mindset of failing and how to overcome it, and then how to work harder because you will have a higher goal. So definitely the mental part of it. And I think for a 17-year-old, that's what really helped them, was that they saw more maturity in him as a 17-year-old.
And so that's really another key point, that when we speak about development, again, most people will probably look at development and they're looking at it, how does he field a ground ball? How does he hit? All of the rudimentary things with baseball. But most people don't realize that a huge part of developing a baseball player is developing the mental side. And like you said, teaching players how to deal with adversity, how to come back and fight after you just gave up that 3-run homer. And that's a huge part of a player's development.
Yep. Yeah. Mental exercises, small ones, things that I learned from us. Actually, I was fortunate enough that I had a scout that took a liking to me at a young age, and he was giving me some of that. It was simple things of visualizing before you go to bed, failing and succeeding, not just always doing the succeeding part. Like, so all those things that, you hear today that's out there. And for some of the old timers, like, well, you really do that? Like, yeah, like that's a big part of trying to play at the highest level. And a lot of people don't realize that, there's, developing a player from a mental side. There's the commitment to nutrition. There's a commitment to mobility and making sure they understand they have to be mobile. Like, there's a lot of check marks that you got to go over with players to make them understand the commitment level it takes. Some simple things of get up in the morning and do 10 minutes of core. Like, if you really want to play this game, 10 minutes in the morning before you go anywhere, do your core exercises. Those are all things that kind of get the players to understand the level they want to be at. And, there's good level baseball all over. D3, great level. There's NIA schools. There's so many places they can go play. And I always tell the player, look, the difference in where you want to play is the amount of time you want to put in. Because if you go play for D1 and you're up at 6 a.m, hitting the weight room, going to class, coming back for individuals, then team practice, and on top of that, you got to keep your GPA up. You got to be ready for that, and it's got to start like right around that sophomore year, understanding that level.
So this becomes a job essentially, as the younger ages, a part-time job, and then as you get into the older ages in your junior or senior year of high school, even certainly once you get to college, it's a job. It's a job in coalition with going to school and getting your grades and all that. But you have to be ready for that kind of commitment. So let's talk a little bit about goal setting. You touched on it there a couple of times. Where you had as a senior, the goal for Lenny was getting up to 100, but obviously all different kids at different positions are going to have different things. So let's talk a little bit about what's important there.
So, yeah, I think, the first place I like to start with that is really, this is for the parents have to step back and understand that it's not their goals. It has to be the players' goals. and having those sit down conversations with your player to say, hey, what are your goals in the game of baseball? You know, where do you see yourself? Like, do you see yourself wanting to play at a D1 level, D2 level? And, you know, those conversations at 13 maybe don't mean as much, but if you start them early, now by 14, you're having it again. Like, it's not something that's going to happen once and then the conversation goes away. It's something that as a kid progresses, you continue to have that, ask that question. It helps the player understand that it's not about the parents, it's about him. And I think the quicker the player recognizes it's about his goals, the quicker we can get to goal setting. Because to set goals for a kid because the parents want it, we're not going to get anywhere. And that's usually when I have the conversation with the players. It's typically not me with their parent. That's usually one conversation. Then I usually pull the players in and say, okay, what's your goals? Like, where do you see yourself in this game? How much, you know, we start really digging in a little bit to find out what is it they want to do in the game. And then I get them to understand, okay, so when we start that goal setting, now I'm holding you accountable to it. So if you say you're going to be at the facility, you know, 8 hours a week and I only see you 2 days, like, I'm going to ask you a question. Well, hey, what happened? And they start recognizing it. But what I have found in the years of doing this with some of my key, you know, my players that really aspire to be at the highest level. And again, that's usually not a big percentage, by the way. We have a lot of kids playing, but not all of them aspire to be that D1 player and MLB player. They all love the game. They want to be around it. But what I have found is that once I get them to set the goals, they are disciplined to make it happen. They stay locked into it. I don't have to babysit them. I don't have to ask them those questions. I'm getting the text, hey, coach, I have a big test tomorrow. I can't make it in today, but I'll make it up on Saturday. Like, then they're guiding their path instead of us dragging them through the path. So goal setting to me is going to be one of the biggest things that we can help our players with. We use metrics a lot, you know, not launch angles or any of that stuff, more like the things that are achievable, like what's your 60-yard dash, you know, how hard are you throwing across the diamond, you know, how fast you get from home to first, the things that relate to the game of baseball in a sense that will help them kind of along the lines to open those eyes of a high-level player for a coach to look at them. You know, obviously we look at hitting, we'll look at bat exit speed and all that, but I'm not going to sit there and say, oh, we have to have a launch angle to hit home runs. You know, it's not about that. It's about how many times get you the barrel on the ball. You know, NCAA has numbers out there that tell you an average D1 shortstop and a Division I runs a 6'6", hits 550 in high school. Like, they tell you that. It's not us making the metrics up. So when a kid says that to me, I'm like, okay, here's your metrics. This is the goal. This is what you have to hit to play at those levels. And then the question is, what are you going to do to get there, right? So, but I think the more we share that with players, the more they see it, they understand their bucket then, and they love the game, so they're going to keep playing. It's not going to stop them. But if they see their metrics are in the D2, then they know, wait, that's where I got to focus. That's where I'm going to succeed. You know, to go sit on the bench in the D1, well, what am I doing? You know, had that conversation with one of my pitchers. I had a kid that I for sure thought he was a D1 pitcher, a little tough because of COVID. But at the end of the day, when we talked, I said, well, you know, if you go to a D2 school, you're a starter right out of the gate. Like, you're going to be on the mound. And that made him make that choice of, hey, I'm going to go that route because I want to play. So every player will kind of, once they set their goals, they will stick to it. And if not, then they'll learn early, like, hey, maybe this is not what I want to be doing, you know. But that hasn't been the case yet for the kids that come to me and say, I want to set goals, coach. I've done it with college kids that leave the facility. We set up a calendar and we, you know, get things into the calendar so I can see that they're doing their work. And, you know, there's baseball, you know, has to be something you really love to do because you got to learn to fail, but there's a lot of time committed to trying to get better. So I definitely feel that, you know, goal setting becomes huge and getting the metrics to them and showing them where they stand is really important. We've moved down that road. Everything we do now is pretty much we do the metrics. Every player has that in their dashboard. As soon as they log in, they can see what their 60 time is, their 30, their 10. Like, so we want them to be aware of those numbers so that they can work towards something. But I think goal setting is probably the most important thing you need to do by the age of 14 with that player that truly wants to continue to grow.
Just to elaborate a little bit on the goal setting. So basically what you're saying is that what we need to focus on, and you've heard me talk to my players about this, is that we need to be focused on the process-based goals. Okay, so when we're talking about process-based goals, we're talking about, like you said, how to get that 60 time down to 6'6". What are you doing to achieve that process goal so that you can ultimately achieve your outcome goal of maybe being a D1 player, a D2 player. And it's got to be done in baby steps. Because if you just come out of the gate and you say, well, I just want to be a D1 player. Well, that's a goal. Yes, it is. But how are we achieving that goal? Our goals are different than what you're working with your players. We may be setting a goal to make sure that we get our front foot down early, or a goal of, make sure that we're staying on our backside and we're not getting out in front of the pitch. But nevertheless, players have to set goals to get to where they want to be. It's like ladders that you're climbing.
But, again, I just had a conversation with Lenny. He just started throwing again a few weeks ago, I say about a month ago, his first live game since he had surgery. And, we just had a conversation about, hey, set 1 or 2 goals every game. That's your focus right now. Just if you accomplish that, don't worry about the result yet. Like, just hit your goals for the day. And it becomes so important when you start looking at the game in that fashion. And, when we had Hector with us, who was a Pirates sports psychologist, he narrowed it down for an 11U team. Let's have 1 goal at practice. Let's have 1 goal in the game and just learn to funnel into those 1 or 2 goals. And if each player has 1 or 2 goals they're working on, then at least it's a goal that we're trying to set. And when you have those conversations after an outing, it's, hey, how did you do with your goals? Instead of what the result was, it's how did you do with your goals? How many first pitch strikes did you have? How many, 0-2 counts did you blow? Like anything like that is really what is kind of controllable, right? The outcome of a game could be 1 bad error and you lost the game 3-0 or whatever. So we can't worry about those things if we focus on development and what are we learning each time we go out there. It's so important. I had a few kids in today for hitting. We talked about, hey, what did the weekend look like for you, at your at-bats? So what's your goal today when you're here at practice? Like, are you just going to take swings, or is there something you learned from the weekend that you need to improve on today? And that's what our in-season program is about. Just get those 1 or 2 things fixed.
All right. Well, that was our discussion with Angel Lugo, the owner of Cadets Player Academy in Fishkill, New York. If you are a team looking for a facility to practice at, if you are a player or a parent with a player that is looking to get your kid up to that next level, it's a great idea to reach out to them, set up some time to come in and talk to them. They also have their own fleet of travel teams that are, I'm sure at this point, established, but you can get in on board with the individual training or some of the group trainings. You've got the promotion you're doing with the Fishkill Little League that's coming up with the youngest players on focusing on young player development. I think that's fantastic. I really think we covered a lot of good stuff today, Angel. I want to thank you for joining us, coming aboard.
Thanks for having me, guys. I look forward to coming back on if you need anything else.
I feel like during this conversation, we maybe just scratched the surface of a lot of stuff. So, I know that, this is going to be an ongoing conversation that we're going to have from time to time. I think it'll be beneficial to everybody to hear what Angel has to say because, people have listened before. I've mentioned Angel's name on the podcast before, and I'm not just saying this because he's here, but he's been very instrumental. What's that? And my boss. Yeah, well, but you want to know something? Yes, he's my boss, but I look at him more as a friend and a mentor than I do as a boss. But he's taught me so much because, like I had said earlier, that I look at myself as a field coach that is kind of like a utility player. If I don't know something, I have somebody, and a lot of people don't have this. I have somebody I can go to. Like I came to you recently about a slide step because I had never taught it. I didn't know how. So I have somebody I can go to and I could say, listen, I need help with this. So anyway, the point is there's so much more that we can get from him. I think that we'll be talking again soon.
Sounds good.
So there you have it. There's the interview with Angel Lugo. So what do you think, Dave?
I think it was great. I think that we went into some different directions in much deeper detail than what you and I normally get into with those things. So it was a nice departure from one of our normal, regular conversations.
Right. And I agree. And like I had said, I also believe that he's going to be a source that we're going to go to every once in a while because we just really just scratched the surface. There's really so much more that he has to offer that would really benefit our listeners that are involved in youth baseball.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll definitely get him back on the line down in a future episode. And in the meantime, we want to thank everybody for listening to us. But one thing I wanted to mention, I did see that you had another article published in the May June Inside Pitch magazine. Congratulations!
Thank you. Yeah, it's a little bit of a ongoing thing. I started writing for the magazine. I don't know, maybe about 2 years ago. Had several articles published, and this one was a good one. Basically, again, goes back to what we were talking about. It's coaching for the next level. It's how to get players ready to make that next step from, say, town ball to high school ball to college ball and beyond. And there are steps within. There's steps within rec ball. There's steps within high school, freshman, JV, varsity. So yeah, that's what the article is about. If anybody's interested in reading it, it's part of the American Baseball Coaches Association website, where you can find their Inside Pitch magazine, and the article is there.
Yeah, and it is actually still put out in print. So if you can find it at newsstands or your 7-Elevens or what have you. So Inside Pitch magazine, that's great. That's a great honor for you to be able to do that. I think that's fantastic. And again, congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. So that'll wrap it up for this week, folks. I want to thank everybody again for staying with us and listening. And you can reach us on Twitter at The CTB Show. We'd love to hear from everybody. And Jimmy puts out a bunch of good things on there. So check us out on there. You can follow us, review on your Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, review, rate, give us 5 stars. We really appreciate it. And always remember, there's only 2 things in this world that we can control at all times. That's our effort and our attitude. Give me 100% effort, keep a positive mental attitude, PMA, and good things will follow. Coach, final words?
I just want to thank everybody once again for listening. And I'll leave you with, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you on the next one.